Good afternoon, everyone. You're all very welcome to our Aware webinar series today. And Happy New Year to you all. So we're just going to take a moment or two to allow people to join. So just taking a moment to get settled and we'll get going shortly. So welcome everyone who's joining in. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. For everyone who's not aware of our webinars, so we run these webinars the second Wednesday of every month as part of our Aware information program. So my name is Dr. Susan Brannick. I'm clinical psychologist and clinical director with Aware. I'm delighted to be joined by my two guests this afternoon, who I'll introduce properly in just a moment. And we'll be talking today about investing in your mental health, a compassionate approach. So thank you for joining, as I said, today, and do have a look at our website for upcoming webinars, aware.ie. So we offer information and support programs for anyone affected by anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder, as well as including support for those who are supporting a loved one. We also have a lot of programs opening this month in terms of CBT informed programs and living well with bipolar and relatives and friends groups. So do have a look at our website for more information on that. So before we get into our discussion today, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions to our guest contributors via the Q&A box. So I'd really encourage you to ask as many questions as you can. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We may not be able to answer all of them or answer kind of specific individual queries, but we'll do our best. And if you are left with any questions after we have spoken, maybe do speak to your GP or your mental health professional. So now, without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome my two guest contributors today, Anna Czuczman, nutritional psychologist, and Breege Leddy, senior sleep physiologist, who I might invite to introduce themselves. So Breege, if I start with you.
Hi, so my name is Breege Leddy, as you've said, and I am a sleep physiologist. I've been doing this probably about 20 years now, actually. Most of my career would have been spent within the clinical setting, within hospital sleep clinics, where I would have seen all sleep disorders. Then I noticed that the one sleep disorder we weren't seeing in the hospital sleep labs was insomnia. And really back in the days when I started, there was no real treatment within Ireland. So that kind of prompted me to get trained up in this cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So started that up, and that was about 10 years ago. We got the first clinic going on a part-time basis, and then it got so busy, I left the hospital environment, and now I do exclusively treatment for insomnia. And it's even broadening out. This is the whole area of what we'd call behavioral sleep medicine, and that's expanding out. And now I run full-time exclusively online service since the start of the pandemic, so I'd see people basically from all over Ireland that would be referred to me, and we're actually even seeing people from outside of Ireland now as well. So that's background.
Brilliant. Thanks, Breege. A whole host of experience there. So we're good to get into the discussion with you. And Anna, if I can ask you to introduce yourself as well.
Of course. My name is Anna Czuczman. I'm a psychologist and a mind-body nutrition coach. I'm a founder of A.E's Counselling, where I help people who struggle with their relationship with food. And I'm using the tools from both psychology and nutrition to help people through that. My background is in psychology at first. And then my interest already has sparked when I was studying psychology in eating behaviors, and it progressed into developing or founding this clinic called A.E's. So
excellent.
Looking forward to today. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Anna. Again, a whole range of experience to draw from. So I suppose our key kind of areas today are going to be sleep and eating, which I suppose, as we say, are kind of both complicated, but also quite straightforward in some ways. So hopefully having a good conversation about that. And maybe before I kind of get into kind of asking both of you kind of even just to start thinking about the areas generally, maybe a little note on why we're kind of taking a compassionate approach to our topic today. I suppose it's certainly the tradition, isn't it, to focus on in early January this idea of a new year with a new you, and that's not our intention for today. I suppose the kind of hectic Christmas period that we've had really kind of works on this idea that kind of more consumerism is equals more happiness. And then January comes with this symbolism of reinvention. So I suppose many of the kind of the trends we see in our culture today are based on positioning people as being lacking or not good enough, with that never-ending kind of drive to grow and improve. So we certainly get that messaging through lots of different places. And I suppose we know that depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems can be enmeshed with feelings of shame and self-criticism, which can lead to people suffering kind of longer and more profoundly with their mental health. So those intense experiences of shame and self-criticism can leave people struggling to feel safe, relieved, or reassured. I suppose it can leave us feeling maybe in a sense of feeling under constant threat. So I suppose that's kind of a long-winded way of maybe saying that we really see this in January. So that kind of feeling under threat, feeling lacking, meets this cultural expectation of us in January, kind of idealized, unrealistic kind of expectations for big life-changing goals at the beginning of the month. And then for many of us, maybe feeling deflated or hopeless, and maybe a bit stuck as well when we can't continue to carry them forward. So I suppose maybe kind of thinking about our key areas today is based on how we might approach sleep and diet through kind of two basic kind of key ideas. So the first is maybe acceptance, and that means fully embracing our true nature and experiences. And that doesn't mean giving up on yourself or being resigned or putting up with things that aren't okay. So as Tara Brach says, radical acceptance really takes courage. So it's not about ignoring or pushing away issues. It's about facing them head on, exploring them with gentle curiosity. So that's maybe what we're hoping to do today, about maybe thinking about where you are with your diet, where you are with sleep, and kind of maybe taking any lessons and leaving what weighs us down. So the other part maybe of our discussion today is taking that compassionate approach. So responding to the distress and suffering by self-soothing, rather than trying to make changes through criticism and self-punishment. So research would say there is a specialized kind of emotion system which underpins feelings of reassurance, safeness, and well-being. And accessing this emotional system of safeness and well-being can help put the brakes on the threat system. So that system that's activated during shame and self-criticism. So making changes from this place of safety tends to work, which kind of goes against our ideas about kind of making change from, I guess, these kind of big goals or self-punishment or shame or kind of giving out to ourselves. So I guess maybe that's sort of a bit of a preamble into saying there's no need for a new you, but instead maybe coming from this place of safety and friendly curiosity about yourself and your own patterns of coping and responding can lead to kind of making changes that can maybe be more meaningful and easier to kind of keep going with. So that's probably as much as I'm going to say for the whole webinar. And maybe what we might do is kind of start thinking about the starting point, I suppose, really, with maybe starting with sleep. And Breege, maybe if you wanted to kind of tell us about kind of what good quality sleep looks like, and maybe thinking about how Christmas and January might have kind of thrown us all out of our usual routines.
Okay, that's a really good question, and it can be quite a difficult question to actually answer as well, because what defines good quality sleep? Suppose we know sleep is an extremely organized process, and it's what we call sleep architecture. And we go through different stages of sleep during the night. So it's not just we hit the head on the pillow and it's lights out. There's a lot happening while we sleep. But we kind of cycle through these sleeps. I always talk to patients about it's kind of like changing gears in a car. There should be a nice flow from one state to the next. So to put it very simply, we have light sleep, deep sleep, and dream sleep. And each cycle of that sleep usually lasts about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then the whole thing starts to repeat itself. So we'd have several cycles of sleep during the night. And that's the normal architecture. And how that pattern of sleep looks is really going to determine how we function the next day. So, you know, there are specific amounts of these different types of sleep that we should be getting. But I mean, I've been involved in this 20 years, but if you ask me, how was my quality of sleep last night? I have absolutely no way of telling you, you know, I got 15% deep sleep last night, or I got 15% dream sleep. I don't know. But what I do know is how I feel today. And that's the best way of judging how was it my quality of sleep okay last night. So am I waking up feeling relatively refreshed within about half an hour of that awakening? Are my concentration levels okay? Is my short-term memory okay? Is my mood okay? Am I feeling alert at the appropriate times? Am I getting through my day without any great kind of push, or, you know, is everything okay, you know, that I'm getting through the day? And that's really more of a measure of the quality of sleep. Because I suppose when we have a problem with sleep, we completely focus in on that nighttime period. But anybody with any kind of sleep disorder will know that it's not just the problem with the nighttime. It's a 24-hour problem, and we have all of these daytime consequences. And I suppose we all have a bad night's sleep, so we can all relate to one bad night's sleep, but one bad night's sleep doesn't necessarily mean that the overall quality is bad. It's when it goes on to be a more persistent issue. And there are so many sleep disorders. There's actually over 80 sleep disorders in total, but I suppose the one we probably be concentrating on more today is an insomnia disorder, and that has specific characteristics. So if you have a problem getting off to sleep and it's taking you an awful lot longer than the normal 20 minutes or 30 minutes to initiate sleep, that can be an indication. We can also have situations, though, where we get off sleep pretty quickly, but we can't stay asleep. So we have these long periods of wakefulness during the night. Now, we do have to normalize wakes during the night, but if they're a long period for over 20 minutes and the frustration and the anxiety starts to kick in, that's an indication there's something going on. Or if we have very early morning wakes and we just cannot get back to sleep, and they're like, you know, it could be like 3 o'clock in the morning that you're waking up and you're not getting back to sleep. Or if you're just having very restless sleep, that's the kind of an indication that there's a problem with the structure of that sleep, okay? And as I said, then there's all these daytime consequences. But really, if that's happening to you 3 nights out of the 7, and if it's going on for 3 months or more, then you're into probably a chronic phase, which would definitely need some kind of intervention. So as I said, it's more so, how do we rate the quality? It's more about how you feel the next day, more so than that's the best indication as to what kind of sleep we're actually getting.
Yeah, that's really helpful, isn't it? Because I guess, as you say, we can get very fixated, can't we, on the nighttime part of it. And I suppose there's probably loads of other reasons as well that someone might not feel rested. So I guess it's also about kind of if you're saying there's quite clear markers, isn't there? If it's kind of for 3 nights or more out of the week and for 3 months, and then you're thinking, actually, well, let's kind of rule out other stuff as well as to why you might be not feeling alert or not rested or that sort of thing.
Absolutely, because sometimes, though, the consequences of poor sleep can be also the same symptoms as other, and particularly with depression, there's an interlink and an overlap in those symptoms. But I suppose as well, we all become a bit fixated on the amount of sleep we actually get, but more so it's the quality, the quantity, it comes last. So good quality, good consolidated sleep. But we now know that regularity and consistency in our sleep is key. It's far more important than the amount that we actually get.
Yeah. And I guess we'll kind of come in a minute to kind of that link as well between kind of sleep and eating. But I suppose there's a real tendency, isn't there, just to monitor everything. So there's a kind of all those sleep apps and everything, and give you the exact kind of, you said, the different types of sleep. And sure, I guess, as you say, maybe it's actually probably more low tech, but more useful to say, well, actually, how do I feel? And can I get through the day, without feeling completely exhausted? Yeah.
And this is the time of year I get all of the phone calls ringing me up saying, please, can I book in? Because I've got the Fitbit or the smartwatch for Christmas, and it's telling me that my sleep is very fragmented, so I must need help. And I was like, hold on a minute. The first thing you need to think about is, these devices, while the technology is certainly getting better, but these are not validated to analyze our sleep in any way. And when you already have a bit of an issue with sleep, and you introduce this over-analysis, because poor sleepers usually over-analyze their sleep anyway, and then you put an extra layer of analysis, which is not even accurate, that actually just makes the problem much worse. So certainly, as I said, this is the time of year when we're all out of routine, and all of our sleep has probably gone a little bit haywire over Christmas and the New Year, and that's okay. As I said, sleep doesn't have to be perfect all of the time, you know.
Yeah. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? I suppose that's why I was so kind of keen on having that lens on this kind of webinar today. It's kind of this striving for the perfect, and we can monitor every bit of it. And I guess, Anna, we see that too in kind of diet, isn't it? It's like it's a kind of a big area that touches on so many different parts for our, our histories, kind of culturally, kind of moral ideas. And I guess again, in kind of how we eat, why we eat, what we should be eating, it can be really complicated, can't it? So I guess maybe a similar kind of question about kind of talking us through the kind of basics, which I know people kind of know, but maybe it's worth kind of just a bit of a reminder as well, because we can get caught up in the next big thing, can't we? But maybe it's good to kind of go back to the basics of what we should be thinking about in terms of daily nutrition.
Definitely, that's a really good question and a good point about over monitoring what we're doing, whether it's asleep, whether it's what we eat, how much we eat, macros, calories, etc. But coming back to the question about the basics, things like balanced macronutrients. So with the focus on not excluding any of the food groups, protein, fats, and carbohydrates, they all have a really important role to play in our bodies and to support our bodies. So excluding any of those food groups at any certain point is not a good idea, unless it's perhaps medically advised, but that's very specific cases. For example, carbohydrates provides us with energy, mainly that's the energy for our brain, providing us with the glucose. That's what driving our brain. That's our brain's preferred source of fuel, and it needs that fuel to function, to carry you through the day, and to carry all the certain processes in your body. Proteins would support your muscle function, for example. And the fats would be building blocks for your cells. So little building blocks of your body. And they're involved in hormone production as well. Really important. So making sure that you're getting all of the food groups in your diet, that will be first off, to check with yourself whether you see any patterns, whether you restrict any of those food groups. Eating the rainbow, let's say, so eating the variety of foods, experimenting with foods, experimenting with different flavors, experimenting with different textures of the foods as well, making sure that your plate looks colorful, that it's fun as well, because we do eat with all of our senses.
There's definitely something in there, isn't there, about a kind of maybe mindful eating as well. I'm sure we're, even all three of us on this webinar, I'm sure people listening are guilty of the kind of rushed lunch, or doing something in front of the computer. And as you say, actually you do eat with all your senses, and that also might kind of help kind of that experience, but also kind of the relationship to food more generally, kind of taking time with it and savoring it, letting it digest.
Exactly. Sorry.
Yeah.
So what we eat will be as important as how we eat. Whether we're distracted. Whether we're distracted, whether we're present with it.
And I guess that kind of, we've sort of come out of this period of possibly overindulgence, maybe, or where it's a bit more sanctified, and we'll talk about this throughout the webinar. But I suppose if someone's listening now and is thinking, gosh, I've really gotten off track with my eating routine, where would be a good place to start, do you think, to get back on track?
Getting what if there was no track? So I would love to start with that, because yes, it seems like the Christmas cheer has been quickly replaced with that pressure of, okay, you need to start going back on track, or the new year, new me narrative there. Focusing, if people are looking to change their eating habits in any sort of way, thinking about what is the intention behind that for themselves, that kind of ties into the topic of the webinar as well. Is it coming from a place of self-compassion? Is it coming from a place of self-care? Or is it coming from a place of punishment? I have to go back on track because I have indulged during the Christmas period, and now I have to punish myself in a way for that. And that's where all the detoxes are coming from, a kind of the marketing of the detox diets or detox juices, for example, where the idea behind it is that engaging in those detoxes will undo all the kind of damage. I keep saying that quote unquote, but because there's probably no damage that you've made to your body throughout the Christmas period. It's 2 days or 5 days of eating and being present with your family, friends, eating delicious foods. We're emotional beings as well, so the food will be part of that as well. But coming back to starting, where to start? Yes, starting with the intention. What's my intention behind starting the new eating habit? Also starting small. When we jump into January or jump into change, we usually want to change everything all at once, which is not really helpful. Thinking about starting small, perhaps changing one meal during the day, maybe looking at your breakfast. Are you eating breakfast? Are you enjoying breakfast? What can you add to your breakfast to make it more nutritious? So again, coming from that self-care place rather than what can I reduce? What can I restrict to make it more healthy? What can you add instead of reducing? Perhaps looking at your overall eating pattern during the day. Maybe there is some irregularities during the day. For some people, they will have breakfast and they will have lunch, but between lunch and dinner, there will be a huge gap where they don't eat anything. And when it comes to the dinner time, then they feel ravenous and it's really hard to make decisions then on what to eat, because we would love to eat anything and everything and quick. So it's very difficult to make that decision then. So perhaps looking at the pattern of the eating throughout the day or throughout the week. For some people, that would be restricting during the week, and then the weekends would be spent as a cheat days, which the language around is not really helpful either. But there would be, they perhaps would be binging over the weekend, and then restricting from Monday. The diet starts again. Yeah,
it's painful, isn't it? I guess it kind of engenders a kind of a level of suffering, as you say. Maybe one of the key bits of it, this kind of perpetual cycle of restriction, kind of punishment, and I guess some of that might kind of tie into sleep a little bit. I think it's more apparent in food, though, isn't it? Our relationship to that. And as you said, I think the really key message there is it's about tying it into your intentions. Is this about kind of self-care and nourishing, or is it and kind of being curious about it, or is this about, well, I feel like I've had too much, so I need now to kind of get into this So it's, I guess, maybe what you're saying is maybe kind of inviting people to step out of that cycle, and as best we can to kind of have that balance. And I guess that's maybe where I was starting from earlier, of it. Sometimes we have to kind of know where we are too. So there's a kind of honesty with ourselves. Okay, well, how are things in this area for me, and where to start from. And I guess just hearing you talk there as well, I was thinking about sort of stress can be quite a key factor in that as well. And oftentimes we go to food to manage feelings, you know. So I guess it's just thinking about when you're saying about kind of getting to the point of being very hungry, but also kind of other things can drive our eating behavior. And maybe it's worth kind of thinking about, because stress is like a huge area, isn't it, for sleep and eating. And maybe if I come back to you, Breege, for a minute, in terms of thinking about kind of what even happens in your body with stress and cortisol, and how that might affect sleep, and then how it might kind of come back to diet again.
Well, we know that when people have a problem with sleep, they're going to get stressed. And what happens is cortisol increases. And we know that for good sleepers, cortisol levels are pretty low before sleep. But if you have a problem with sleep, there's an element of anticipation about getting into that bed. Bed is really not that nice place to be. And also the unpredictability that goes along with it. You know, is this going to be a good night? I've done all the good things, you know, that I was meant to do, or that social media have told me to do for the start of January. Like I know last year was like the 5 a.m. club was the kind of the sleep hack of the year. And I was like, no, that's not accurate at all. But again, it's this strives for perfection. I must get X number of hours sleep tonight, and if I don't get that, then, you know, if I don't get a good quality sleep tonight, I'm going to be terrible at all the things I have to do tomorrow. So there's this enormous pressure on us to get this night of sleep. And if that's not been achieved, cortisol is going to be increased. As I said, bed is not a nice place for someone that has a sleep disturbance. So what happens is we know now that people, particularly with insomnia disorder, have higher levels of cortisol before sleep. And if you have these higher levels of cortisol before sleep, it's going to impact our ability to get to sleep. But we also know that there can be physical changes in our brain activity when we do sleep. And we're now recognizing and seeing insomnia disorder now as more as a disorder of hypervigilance. And that ties back to this higher levels of cortisol. As I said, it changes the structure of that brain activity. So it's probably easier to explain it if we're in a deep sleep, our brain activity is really low. So we look at these kind of slow waves. And on these slow waves, it can be these tiny little specks of wakefulness. So it's like there's pieces of wakefulness filtering into your brain activity. Now, as a patient or as a person that's asleep has actually no idea that this is actually happening. But what they do report then the following day is that it's like the body's alarm system is just not shutting off. And they tend to say that, you know, they're poor sleepers or they're very light sleepers. So they will necessarily hear things that a good sleeper won't hear. So they're more vulnerable to these wakes. And as I said, it's this hypervigilance. So this sleep that they actually get, even though it could be the good structure, they're not feeling the effects of it. And it can be all tied back to these higher levels of cortisol. And I had a patient this morning and she said one of the nights over Christmas, I heard one of the kids' toys went off. It started playing music in the middle of the night. But like that, she could hear that, whereas the bed partner wouldn't necessarily hear that. So it's really affecting how we get this. Our sleep is extremely restless. So this is where, you know, that preparing ourselves for sleep by chilling out, by relaxation, is the best way of bringing down levels of cortisol before bedtime. But I said there's this whole despair and anxiety attached to sleep. And that's what we need to kind of work on, because we can't dictate when we sleep, but we can dictate what we do in the run up to bedtime, which is increasing our chances of sleeping. We can't make ourselves sleep by just sheer will. It's about being as relaxed as you can, chilling out, enjoying that run up to bedtime, and to try to take the effort out of sleep, because you're trying to strive to do something that may not be achievable. You may never get 8 hours or whatever. So it's just about trying to take the effort out of sleep, and that will automatically relax you and bring down cortisol levels.
It's nearly counterintuitive, isn't it? You want to try to work really hard to get to sleep, but as you say, maybe that's just increasing the stress levels and having you more maybe agitated, so you're not going to sleep. And it's interesting, that idea that it's an idea of hypervigilance. I guess it's that kind of fight or flight system is on, and I guess it's kind of one of the links, isn't it, between kind of when we're in that state, as you say, kind of it floods our body, and then it's going to affect sleep, and then obviously then we kind of seek out certain foods in that kind of hypervigilant state or fight or flight, don't we, Anna? You think, I guess there's kind of certain foods that we're attracted to, and I guess then we get into a cycle possibly of stress eating, as it maybe kind of it's called, or kind of, I would call it maybe kind of emotional regulation through eating, and then that might pull us back into guilt, shame, regret, and then more punishment. So it kind of brings up a lot, doesn't it?
It does bring up a lot, and I would love to take away or normalize perhaps eating, stress eating or emotional eating, as it sometimes called as well, because we are emotional creatures, and regulating with food works. That's why we do it. If it wouldn't work, we wouldn't be engaging in that in the first place. So it can be grounding, it can be calming. To be able to digest the food, we have to go into rest and digest response of our body. So, and that's regulating our system, our body as well. So it's only after that, when the thoughts are kicking in and the guilt is kicking in, oh, I've done it again, or I shouldn't have eaten that. The thoughts that are very, very common, that are kind of driven by that belief that we shouldn't be eating that, or that we're not following the diet, or that we broke certain rules of the diet that we're following, which most of them are just unrealistic and unsustainable. And looking at that with compassion, looking at yourself with compassion for doing that as well, just kind of may create that space that we need to look at the pattern. What can be changed there? How can I approach it differently after next time it happens? Because it most likely will, because it's been working for so many years. For some people, the emotional eating and responding to stress with eating, and it's been working in a certain way. So perhaps stepping away from that, and looking at it with compassion, and seeking the ways of stress management that are not utilized, or that we don't perhaps have access to yet, but what can we do there? How can we manage our stress differently? Or what ways of managing stress can we add to our daily life, on a weekly basis or daily basis, so that we don't rely on food only for that emotion regulation or for stress management there.
Yeah, it's really key, isn't it? I guess that idea of kind of a compassionate approach, it's not just about being kind or whatever, but it's about kind of delving into the darker parts as well, isn't it? So how we kind of bring kind of space to manage maybe very difficult emotions, or different emotions that we don't want or like. And I guess maybe the kind of theme of what you're both saying is that we're kind of talking about physiological processes here as well. So there's a whole chemical kind of background to what goes on, and we can get caught in behavioral kind of loops. But there's something very key about allowing that space for the rest and digest kind of emotional regulation system. And from that place, maybe that place of safety kind of change, but how we might regulate that through different ways. So there's you kind of maybe the kind of stress management through, and that could be, people have different sort of strategies for that, don't they? In terms of, as you were saying, Breege, maybe things that you might do before sleep, and I guess thinking about how to down regulate some of anxiety or stress, calming things, and not just passive things, but actually things that we know are restorative, and some of the more old-fashioned things I'm still very in favor of, like relaxation training. So actually being in your body, kind of allowing that relaxation. Maybe it's about reading a book, maybe it's about kind of having a cup of tea, or kind of doing something lower level, isn't it? And I guess it's kind of the importance of that throughout the day, but maybe at kind of nighttime as well, as you were saying, Breege. And I just see there's a kind of question as we're talking about coming on, kind of, which I think you've talked about, kind of how you might prepare for bedtime. And I suppose there's a lot of discussion, isn't there, about the phone and where it should be. Should it be in the boot of the car? Should it be somewhere else in the house? Or is it okay to have it next to you? And maybe it's worth us saying something about some of those kind of ideas.
Yeah, this is a really common question that I get asked. You know, what should I be doing in the run up to bedtime? And you know, people come in with great skills, and you know, there's meditation and relaxation exercise, which are absolutely wonderful. But not all people are good at them, you know, and the problem we do is we wait until we get stressed, and then we start to try the relaxation, and we're not very good at it, and we don't ever do it during the day. So we need to practice these things. You know, it's not going to happen straight away. But if it's a thing that you don't have these strategies, what can you do in the meantime? I mean, it can be something very simple, like, as you said, reading the book, watching a bit of TV. And this is where the smart device, because look, technology is there. And I suppose if I was talking to you 5 years ago, I'd have said, absolutely not, turn off all smart devices in that at least an hour and a half before bed. Because when we talk about the smart device, it's all to do with blue light. And light is, I mean, it's absolutely fundamental. It's one of the biggest indicators as to when we should sleep and when we should wake. But in particular, this blue light, it's been known to suppress the production of melatonin. And melatonin is one of the major sleep hormones. Now, there's loads of others, but we have a bit of control over the melatonin. And with blue light, it suppresses melatonin, so therefore it delays sleep onset. So it stops us falling asleep as quickly as we would like. However, the latest evidence has kind of blown that out of the water to a certain degree. Yes, we know that blue light does affect melatonin, and yes, it does push off or delay our sleep time. But if it's going to do that, it's probably only going to do that for about 10 minutes. Okay, so it's not really worth talking about. So, but more so, it's how you use those devices. Okay, I would have a lot of teenagers, they don't have a TV. What they use is either their phone, their laptop, or the iPad, whatever. So they're like, well, what am I meant to do? I don't have a TV. I don't like reading, because some people don't like reading, or older people may have problems with their eyesight. What do? Absolutely, they can use their phone or their tablet or their smart TV to watch something that they want to watch because it relaxes them and because they're enjoying it. And that's absolutely fine, because they have control over the content. However, if you have somebody and you're into playing the Xbox or PlayStation, that's highly cognitively stimulating. So that's what's actually going to push off your sleep. If you're somebody that works on the laptop right up to bedtime because you want to get this last bit done before bed, there's an element of stress, and that can bring up the cortisol, which again, that's going to affect your sleep. Or if you're scrolling on social media and you're looking at the ones that are telling you, you know, we should have ate this and we should have been doing the detox, or you should have been up at the 5 a.m. and you're now looking at this and saying, I didn't do any of that today, that's really going to just knock your confidence completely. Also, you're being bombarded by this vast volumes of information, which the brain now has to try to sort that out. So it's all of that kind of stuff that's going to have a bigger impact on your sleep than the actual blue light. So yes, absolutely, you can use your smart device, but it's about how we use them, having control over what we watch. And it's about doing something that relaxes you. Even if it's a thing of watching TV, I tell people just be careful and avoid the news, because there's so much bad news out there. And it's also avoiding politics, because this stuff stores up the emotions, and it's usually the negative emotions that it can store up, and you don't want that in the run up to bedtime. It's about that relaxation. So really, to put it very simply, you do whatever you want to do to chill out and to relax in that run up to bedtime. And if it involves using that smart device, absolutely fine to do so, but just make sure it's not overly stimulating, cognitively stimulating.
Yeah, it's such a good point, isn't it? And I suppose a lot of maybe the kind of business model of the news and social media is to evoke quite powerful emotional reactions. And as you say, maybe as well as kind of that kind of cognitive stimulation of being on the Xbox. So it's about kind of maybe knowing yourself, isn't it? Or that kind of, again, that gentle curiosity is like, oh, so what sort of kind of, where am I left after I do this activity? Am I really stressed out, or am I thinking now about what's going on, or what can I do, or comparing? So it's, as you say, there's that kind of, yeah, the kind of coming to where you're at with it and saying, okay, well, how do I feel it? And could I try something different? Could I experiment with this different approach and see what that does? It's that kind of experimental idea rather than saying, okay, so I think, not to say the name of it, but that very famous podcast, I think the person there it's kind of given a sleep package of kind of different things that he takes. And I think it was so many people bought it. You know what I mean? There's so much like, do this, and this is going to be the thing that works. And it's actually, I guess what both of you are saying, that's just not the case. It's a very individual thing. You come to food with your whole life experiences, your relationship to yourself, memories of food, and we come to sleep with kind of our expectations. And as you say, kind of how we might relate to stress. And there's it's such an individual process. There isn't going to be like, if you take this, or if you do that, or if you do X or Y, it's going to be the thing that's kind of fixes everything. I guess I don't know what you both think about that, or
Yeah, I mean, I find that all the time, and sleep it has just exploded over the last couple of years. There's so much information out there, and as you know, there's no quick fix in terms of sleep. I see people on social media saying, "Oh, these 5 hacks for sleep, and do these 3 things, and you'll be sleeping great," or "Fix your sleep in 7 days." That is not realistic at all. It you know, and it's and selling, you know, things to help it, the gadgets people buy in terms of sleep. There is no quick fix. We have control over it ourselves, but it's a completely individual thing. It's not a one size fits all. And even, I suppose, which is a bit contradictory, because even the treatment for sleep is very, for insomnia is a very standardized treatment. It's actually a manualized treatment, but it has to be tailored towards the individual. And even within that very structured framework, we now know that we're actually expanding that out to target specific groups of people, you know, that there's no one size fits all, but it's about finding out, and sometimes trial and error, what works best for me. And it's about trying to find that out and then trying to just keep consistent with that as well. So.
It's kind of consistency and balance, isn't it? Yeah. Anna, go ahead there.
Sorry, I would be able to just build on what Breege said there around social media and how people sell certain things, and how certain supplements are being sold as well as a quick fix, or that magic pill that usually is associated with the weight loss, or what I eat in a day video. So that's kind of that comparison piece as well. What I eat in the day videos are highly edited as well. 90%, 99% not true. And if someone does eat like that, that doesn't mean that it's healthy for them, but it doesn't mean that if you follow that, it will be healthy for you too. So it has to be, instead of looking outside to the external messaging, I would invite people to look what works for them, and trust their intuition a little bit more when it comes to the food as well. And because that comparison part where it's either comparing yourself to other people, or some of the diets or diet programs are encouraging people to compare them to themselves from a certain period of time as well, like before and after photos, which, just a reminder there that our bodies change and we change, and you have different nutrient needs, nutritious needs
Mm.
now than you had when you were a toddler, then you were a teen, when you were pregnant, then when, you know, maybe perhaps when you were playing sports as a pro athlete. You know, those change when we grow and evolve as well. So just remembering about that and looking at your life at now, how your life looks like right now, and looking how can you fuel yourself again from that place of compassion. How can you fuel your life?
Yeah, rather than this kind of comparison. But yeah, that's really important. And I guess maybe the question has kind of come in there, which maybe relates a bit to what you're saying, Anna, about kind of what to add to food to make it healthier. Does increasing protein help, or is it just a mix of things to add? And I suppose I would say I wonder, maybe not that specifically, but I think those sort of questions are quite common, aren't they? So I suppose if someone's thinking, gosh, what will I, bit more detail after this webinar, kind of more generally, where would I find information about what I should be eating, or how kind of to where would you suggest, do you think, someone can get more detailed kind of information on that sort of thing?
Definitely. So people who are trained in nutrition, their websites usually have plenty of free resources, even if you're not looking for one-to-one support at the moment, you can still use those resources that are usually free. And people are happy to send them as well. They're just educational resources, and they're simply put, and they're coming from a place of understanding, and there are credentials behind that as well. So these people would be experts in what they're saying as well. So usually check the credentials and check what is the message that they're trying to say as well. Is the focus on the quick fix, or is the focus on long-term health and well-being? Even the wording between both would be different there. Does that answer the question there?
Yeah, no, it really does. I guess I was really thinking, so less of the what I eat in a day videos, and more actual dietitians or nutritionists, or, as you say, people who are qualified, that's supported by an evidence base, and kind of checking in with the intention. So it's not lose weight in 28 days or something, but actually this is kind of like supporting eating for well-being. And I guess maybe something similar for you, Breege, as well. I guess just thinking, there's a very famous book on sleep, isn't it? There's lots of podcasts on sleep, and I guess in that domain, where might someone go to think, gosh, this is reliable information that is evidence-based, that I can trust, bearing in mind, as you say, that evidence is evolving. That's fine, but
I know exactly the book you're talking. It's probably the most famous book that's out there, and it's banned from the clinic, so I won't even mention it, but it's probably a #1 bestseller. I'll say no more. You see, the thing again about sleep, because it's unregulated really largely outside of the medical domain, and it's falling into the kind of the wellness industry, which again is not regulated. So again, it's looking for somebody that has the proper qualifications. And just because they say they're an expert doesn't necessarily mean they are. It's about looking at the qualification that they have, research the qualification, because there are certain, ones that you can get a qualification over the weekend if you really want to in sleep, So it's about really looking at the person's qualifications, bearing in mind there's very, very few of us actually qualified in this. So I was looking for kind of references for people to look up just for the purpose of this. And to be honest, it's few and far between. The only kind of website I kind of saw was kind of the National Sleep Foundation, and they're American based. There's also a kind of an Australian equivalent as well. Unfortunately, the ones that we look at, the HSE and the NHS, it's not great, to be honest, so you kind of have to look further afield. But looking at the books, in terms of some very good self-help books, and it's one of the lesser known ones if somebody does have a real issue with insomnia disorder, and it's by a Professor Colin Espy. It's very practical and it's very easy to follow. And it's maybe about a tenner on Amazon, but that will be one of the better ones, but the lesser known ones. So, and as Anna was saying, look at the credentials. Just because somebody is, and in particular if they're trying to sell you something for a quick fix, stay well clear, you know. But I suppose with sleep, you can always start at the basics, you know, and that's where we talk about sleep hygiene. Look, is your environment right? Are you trying to keep a bit of structure during the day? All of these, we can start at the basics. But if you feel that you're doing all of those things and sleep is still not good, or you're not happy with it, you need to speak to your doctor, because these are medical conditions and they must be treated appropriately as well.
Yeah, no, that's really key, isn't it? Excuse me, and I'm just thinking, I guess also it's probably a whole other webinar in and of itself, but I guess the relationship of sleep and kind of diet to depression as well. And I suppose kind of if sleep is, for many people, they would describe as that's kind of both kind of a good kind of sign that things aren't okay. So as you say, it might be struggling to get off to sleep, and that you've touched on it a bit, but I guess it also could be a lot of rumination or kind of going over stuff in your head. It could be early awakening, which is also another kind of indicator of maybe mood is actually quite low here. So it's kind of worth kind of having that conversation with a GP or a health professional to say, actually, well, yeah, what might be happening here that's getting in the way. And I guess maybe similar, Anna, with kind of eating, it's a good indication too, whether it's kind of eating more than usual, or it's completely losing your appetite. But these are kind of indications actually, because I know it sounds strange in a way that you think, well, if you're depressed, you might know, but oftentimes it's not that obvious. It's not as straightforward as kind of, well, I'm feeling very low in myself, so that's it. It might be other signs are saying, actually, this is maybe a downward path for a depressive episode, or it might be kind of touching in and saying, actually, my appetite's completely out. That might be something to pay attention to in terms of thinking, well, actually, how is my mood and how's everything else?
Definitely.
What would you think to that?
That will be a two-way street as well. So,
Yeah.
the relationship between the food and how we eat and depression or mood.
Yeah.
So, as you've mentioned there, the signs that are food intake is changing in any way. So whether we lose the appetite or significantly, or whether there is an increase in appetite, that may indicate that yes, something is happening for us emotionally, and we're trying to cope in a certain way. That can be the sign there. In terms of the food part, there's that chronic inflammation that comes that has been linked to depression as well. So that will be the state of inflammation in our body that is underlying, and that can be caused by eating certain types of food, certain types of refined foods, refined carbohydrates, and refined sugar. So simple carbs as well. So looking at that part as well, so there is that can influence then our mood, and can have an impact on the depression, on the onset of depression, or making the symptoms of depression worse as well. So it will be helpful looking at how can we mitigate that as well, kind of from the food perspective. So having regular meals, for example, making those meals smaller, prioritizing the omega-3 and 6, because that's the fatty acids that our body can't make by itself. It can produce them, so we have to bring them to our bodies with the diet or supplement as well. That will be the option if someone is depressed as well. If that's kind of something to discuss with the doctor as well. if there is a space for supplementations in terms of the omega-3 and omega-6 to support our brain health, to support our heart health as well. So engaging in those, and hydration will be a big one as well. That's for either someone who is depressed or for general population as well, because if we do feel dehydrated, if we are dehydrated, that can impact on our mood in a negative way as well. And our body needs the water to for all of the processes really, and to nourish our body with the nutrients to just it's so important
It's so
for our cognitive functions.
Yeah, absolutely. Cognitive functions, kind of overall functioning. And I suppose maybe people listening to us, and there's a question here about kind of maybe having lots of different concerns, maybe food, sleeping, anxiety and depression. How do you kind of approach them all? Do you tackle sleep with a sleep professional, anxiety with a therapist, etc.? And I would say, maybe kind of it'd be interesting to hear both of your views on it. And we're kind of coming to an end, but I think maybe the key messages that we're saying is start small. What's the smallest sort of thing that I like your approach, Anna, of what can I add in, rather than what could I take away, or how can I kind of get back on track or punish, like what can I add that could help? And that could be food, in terms of, but also what can I add into the day, as we were saying, Breege, too, about kind of managing stress and having that kind of supporting that rest and digest kind of emotional system. And as you had touched on, kind of really kind of basic sleep hygiene stuff that kind of is, as you said, kind of that SB book is kind of a good resource. And the sleep foundation, I think you mentioned, and as you said, the kind of maybe starting with kind of gathering that information. It's piece by piece, isn't it? You don't have to do a whole overhaul or tackle everything together. It might even be about regular routine meals, kind of food in between, and an intention to get kind of the sleep hygiene sort of a bit more routine. Maybe they're the small steps without having to do everything. I don't know, Breege, what do you think about that? Or maybe kind of for someone who might be overwhelmed with
and it is overwhelming, and when you have all of these, because when your sleep is out, your eating is out, your mood is out, everything is kind of just comes tumbling down, and you're like, where do I start? What do I do? But I suppose there's kind of overlaps as well, because part of what we would do is by trying to put regularity to this master clock that we have that kind of dictates our sleep and wake cycles. And eating regularly is something you can do to help to give back that sense of time, because when we have this disturbance, we start to lose that sense of time, because you may be wide awake when you should be fast asleep, and vice versa. So things like the eating at regular times can make a huge difference. They're what we call a Zeitgeber, givers of times or time cues. So it could be something as simple as that, and you're kind of nearly killing two birds with the one stone. It could be something as simple as getting light early on, by maybe just starting with a 20-minute walk earlier on in the morning. That has a huge impact on your mental well-being, your physical well-being, and also your sleep. So, and I liked what you said throughout this. You said, it's very complex, and sleep is certainly a very complex system, but it also is very simple. And I always start off when I see any patient, say, look, this is not rocket science, but it's about having the right tools, and it's very practical, like, as I said. And probably if I could give any advice to anybody to leaving here today, the one thing that they could do to help regulate their sleep is by very simply setting an alarm clock and get up at a consistent get up time every morning, because we can't dictate when we are going to feel sleepy, because there's variations from night to night. We're not going to sleep exactly the same way. Like feeling hungry, you're not going to feel exactly the same amount of hunger at the same point every single day. There's variation from today to day, and our sleep changes. So it's about just knowing what it's like to feel sleepy, and it's a biological function. It's going to happen, but we really can't dictate. But so we put the effort into what we do have control over. You have control over getting up at the same time every day. you have control over going for your 20-minute walk early in the morning, and you have control over your scheduled eating times as well. So
Yeah.
it's simple. It's the basics like that as well.
Brilliant. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, thank you, Breege. It's good. It's a good reminder. And I guess thinking about time, we are running out almost of our own time together today. So thanks, Breege, for the kind of, as you said, the kind of one thing. And we've got very little time left. But if it was even to kind of finish with you about the very briefly, the one thing that you would say around food that someone could kind of take away with them.
Yeah, I would love for them to take away the fact that the quality of our thoughts are as important as what we eat as well.
Yeah.
The quality of the thoughts around food and about
Yeah.
food and about ourselves as an eater. Yeah, that's something that I would love for people to stay with and think about, reflect on.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Breege, so much. Thanks everyone for joining us. So hopefully it's a really good, hopefully we've done enough of a good service to kind of maybe thinking about starting points. So thank you for your expertise and your information here. It's been really, really valuable. And so thanks for joining today, and moving on to the webinar for next month, and continuing our kind of theme around compassion. So we're delighted to be joined by Katie Bard, a compassion focused approach to depression. So if you can, it'd be great if you can join us then 14th of February. Hopefully we'll see many of you then. So thanks everyone again, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you very